Hi, thank you very much to everybody that's going to be joining us today. Extremely pleased to be here with the guests and panelists that we have. For those of you that are aware, this week we published our H1 Turkish venture report on investments that have been happening in the venture space in Turkey. As we continue as MAGNiTT to scale into what we're defining as emerging venture markets, we've now launched the Pakistan report. This is the second report that we've been doing outside of the MENA region. It's been very interesting to see how each of these geographies, startup ecosystems have been growing and the roles that they play, as well as trying to see how there can be cross-pollination and opportunities both for investors, startups, and supporting stakeholders alike on this space. I think what was very interesting, having been to Turkey last year and had firsthand experience in the ecosystem, meeting founders, investors, is really to see how much opportunity exists within Turkey, as well as the opportunity that exists in cross-pollinating the markets. In the report that we just published, we saw that actually this year saw a slight drop in the number of investments, not dissimilar to what we've seen in MENA and in Pakistan alike, but actually the total amount of funding is very similar to full year 2019, which actually replicates much of what we've seen here in MENA. Last year, or this year as well, we've seen the acquisition of Peak by Zynga, which is a large unicorn acquisition that has come out of the Turkish ecosystem, specifically in the gaming sector, which seems to be a hot industry within the Turkish ecosystem. E-commerce was the industry that saw the most amount of investment, again, very similar to other emerging venture markets, where during this COVID period is a key pain point that's being solved for using technology. And one of the interesting takeaways was that the top 5 funded startups this year accounted for about 84% of total investment in the ecosystem in H1. Now we're already in October, and we're already seeing that activity has continued into the summer months and beyond. But to really discuss this, I'm really honored and pleased to have 3 esteemed guests joining us. We have Mr. İlker Kilic, who is the General Counsel of Turkey in Dubai. Very keen to kind of understand where he sees the opportunities of the cross-pollination from the 2 markets. Mr. Ersoy Erkazanci, who I hope I pronounced correctly, who is Dubai correspondent for Bloomberg HT, who has interestingly experience in the economic view, but is very passionate about the startup ecosystem, as well as the opportunity for bridging the 2 markets together. And Mr. Enis Huli, who is the general partner of 500 Startups in Istanbul. Obviously, 500 Startups, the most active investor here in the region, in MENA, but a similar fund that's been set up in Istanbul to share some of the insights from the ground there. And one of the things that I just want to set the tone of the conversation before we jump into the structure, we have, having seen the attendees, people that are MENA enthusiasts that may be interested in learning more about the Turkish ecosystem and the opportunities that exist there, as well as Turkish founders and investors that may be trying to understand a little bit more about the opportunities that exist here in the Middle East. The way this is usually structured is 25 to 30 minutes between us, where I encourage debate, different views, different viewpoints from the panelists, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So if you have questions, please do share them as part of the Q&A chat or in the chat group, and I'll moderate that after about 25, 30 minutes. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us today. If I can start, please, with Mr. İlker. I guess at a very high level, having read the report and some of the takeaways that we've drawn out and your understanding of the market here, what were some of the interesting takeaways that you saw, as well as the opportunities that you believe exist that could be kind of bridged between the 2 markets? If you can unmute.
Mute, yes. So first of all, thank you very much for organizing this event and for your tireless efforts to understand Turkey and to put it into reports. And the interest that you show in Turkey, I think, was substantialized last year when you visited. You saw with your own eyes what is there and what is missing. We had quite a few conversations with you about that, and that's a very, very good feedback. To start with, just I want to salute everyone participating and thank them also for their interest in the Turkish ecosystem. For those who know me, I'm very keen on promoting the Turkish ecosystem here in Dubai, and also at the same time trying to cross-pollinate, as you said it, the two ecosystems. And that actually stems from the fact that I believe that the two ecosystems are complementary. We have in Turkey, we might in the discussion get into the characteristics of the Turkish ecosystem, but if there's one characteristic that I should underline, it's there's a oversupply on the startup and talent side in Turkey, and we see that element is here, of course, in Dubai as well. However, not as flourishing as it is in Turkey, and of course the overhead costs are not the same here as it is in Turkey. For about 1/5 the amount, you can hire the same type of people, perhaps even better talent in Turkey. So I believe that the two ecosystems are complementary. In these days, perhaps we see a lot of startups showing interest in Turkey in the sense of using Turkey as a technology hub, as a technology back office. And I think that's one area that we can think of. As for the, I'll let all the other panelists speak as well. But since you asked, as for my takeaway from your report, I mean, what really struck my attention in the report was the fintech. It was not even in the top 5. I do understand that, of course, this report captures only 6 months. We should not read it as the whole snapshot of the whole ecosystem. However, I mean, it's a big industry in Turkey. I mean, Deloitte 3 years ago valued that at $15 billion. The fintech industry. We see, for example, 2019, the funded 94. There are 94 startups funded in 2019. 17 are fintechs out of them. So that's one thing that struck my attention. And on the more positive side, I see the investment on deep tech increasing. I think that's a big bonus, and I think you highlighted in the report that that's very different from what you call the emerging venture markets, the other emerging venture markets. So that was pleasing to me, and I think that comes also as a result of the government efforts to assist them.
Thank you.
And
that's super interesting. I mean, I guess from the fintech perspective, what's interesting here is it overtook e-commerce, but here it's very much a symptom of the central bank efforts. And given that the MENA region is about 17 countries, here what's been quite fascinating is many of them are trying to do this. And here, therefore, you're seeing this springing effect of multiple fintech startups, not in terms of the amount of investment, but in terms of the number of startups that are getting funding. That's quite an interesting challenge that's being done here in the region. But I'm sure we already know some successfully exited fintech startups in the last couple of years from Turkey as well. I mean, Enis, jumping to you from an investor standpoint. I mean, obviously data is useful for decision making. What were some of the key interesting, or what were for you interesting takeaways from the report? One of the things for me that's particularly fascinating is that there's a high concentration of local investors in Turkey versus the Middle East, where there is still some element of international investors. It's quite a high percentage of local investors investing in local Turkish startups. But what for you was kind of some takeaways that you saw from the report itself?
I think that's a good takeaway. To elaborate more on what you've said, is my voice coming nice and clear, by the way?
Great.
It's good? Perfect. So to elaborate on what you've said, initially, if you go back 10 years ago, a lot of the investment seen in Turkey was actually dominated by international investors. So these would be international VCs, mostly from Western Europe or US, to come and invest into these great Turkish ventures who ended up dominating the market, actually, like Trendyol.com or Yemek Sepeti. But then after 2012, 2013, Turkish investors also jumped in, whether in the form of direct investments or through VC funds like ourselves. So coming to today, we see that a lot of the large rounds, like Getir's round, can be led by international investors. But as you go down to Series A or seed level, there are not that many international investors, and it's either mostly local funds like ourselves or local angels doing the investments. I think what was important in the report was to see that the amount invested in the Turkish ecosystem hasn't been going up over the past 10 years. It's almost flat. It's around $80 to $100 million for the past 10 years. Whereas anywhere else you look in the region, it's just booming, right? I mean, think about Dubai, compare Dubai 2010 versus 2020. the difference would be probably like 10x. Not the case in Turkey. But if you look into exits in Turkey, that's where the arbitrage is. You see exits amounting to more than $3 billion over the past 2 years, which is huge compared to what's been invested. And that discrepancy is actually obvious in your report. And that's what amazes me. I mean, there's huge talent in Turkey, which is also proven by these huge exits that we see, but the invested capital is just not going up. I think that's mostly because we're tightly bound to local investors, and now we need to diversify away from that and be able to attract other international investors to jump in on the seed level.
I think that's exactly it. I mean, I think one of the things that I found striking when I came last year is that I heard so much about the Turkish ecosystem. And when you go there, the size of the population, the size of the market, it's almost comparable to a certain extent, like Pakistan and Egypt, countries which have large populations, large talent bases, large markets to address. But when it came to actual capital invested, it has been very level over the last couple of years. Now, let me caveat that by saying, and it's clear that as we do these reports, this is investment in companies headquartered in Turkey. So there are many companies, and that's happening in MENA, whereby companies set up in one location, then choose to relocate their headquarters to another place, may still have a back office or a kitchen in Turkey. Our reporting standard is those that are headquartered in a specific geography. But yes, still given that parameter, you are seeing that it's interesting to see how that develops. I get, Ersoy, from your perspective, it's fascinating given your economic analytical view. What is the view of venture capital as a driver for the economy in Turkey? And how has, on behalf of the government, the view been to try and spearhead startups? Here in the MENA region, it's clearly been addressed as a key driver, diversifying away from oil, diversifying the economy into different kind of technological. Is that similar in Turkey from an economic standpoint?
First of all, thank you for inviting me, Philip, and good evening to everyone. Well, in Turkey, I think it's a bit changing. Previously, what I realized is private sector was leading all the new developments in Turkey, or venture capital was driving the ecosystem in Turkey. But maybe in the last 3-4 years, government support, the subsidies or grants are really increasing. And what was shocking, interesting for me in your report is the deep tech amount, as Mr. İlker mentioned. Because when you ask to me or Turkish people, what are we good at? We would first start like maybe retail or e-trade, e-commerce, but nobody would put technology at the top place. So I tried to dig this also last two days after reading your report, and what I learned from my friends that government is such supporting this technology, and so that Turkey can export technology. Turkey can, instead of exporting textile or automobiles, we'll try to export more value-added technology. So that's why it's interesting for me to see that the technology investments in Turkey are increasing. It's my first takeaway. The other thing is, one of your surveys, you asked the Turkish investors or Turkish startups why they don't scale up to Middle East. And the answer is interesting for me. We haven't been shown how to. So this was also interesting for me, because Turkish people, if they want, they can do everything. Nobody needs to show them anything. But I think it's a matter of like maybe concentration. We first look to Europe or US to scale up. But now the center of economy is changing. Look at China, look at Asia, or to Dubai. I've been living in Dubai since 5 years. So I think the Turkish investors should like do this mentality shift more, and they should try to think of scaling up to this region also.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Enes in a second, because there's a couple of examples there that I want to. But Mr. İlker, like one of the things that is quite interesting, and you're in a unique position to do, we have an audience here of Turkish startups who may be interested in coming to the MENA region, and you may have Middle Eastern startups who may be interested in going to Turkey. Can you address both sides, how, to exactly the point Ersoy was saying, which is we haven't been shown the way. Are there examples for you of initiatives or support mechanisms, or at least where can they go to find this type of information to help them, both coming here, and if there was a startup looking to go there, who should they reach out to for support?
Thank you. Good question. And that also follows up on your previous question. Since we're talking about government support and I'm the government official on this webinar, I might as well add a few cents to our thoughts. I mean, in terms of government, I think we're very much aware on the importance of the technology ecosystem. I mean, there's a very strong support. I mean, anyone you talk to in the ecosystem would say that the government's support has been above average, I would say at least, and has been good. When you look at it, there are some challenges, of course. There are some improvements that need to be made. However, overall, the government is very cognizant of the fact that we need to expand our ecosystem and we need to produce and export technology to have a better future and a higher income as well. For example, I mean, our new economic model asks Turkish institutions that are going to do any spending, ask them to ask 3 questions. The first question that a Turkish institution should ask before spending or investing into anything is, does it prioritize technology and tech production? I mean, that's a very important question that we keep in mind. And so you see, in the government, from the very top, from the president's office to the lower institutions, you see that in their planning, in their objectives, you see the support for technology overall. And I think the government has been leading the way, especially in the conception and pre-seed phase. I mean, you read many reports on the issue. At some point, the government is the only one that invests into pre-seed conceptual and the idea phase startups, and that really sets the way for a lot of startups to come. So there are extensive supports. There are tax breaks. There are VAT exemptions, income tax exemption, customs duty exemption, interest rate support, grants, training incentives. The list goes on and on what the government provides through a variety of institutions, depending on what it is. And especially R&D is a big issue. I mean, that's one that the government supports very strongly. And so in Turkey right now, we have 84 technoparks. Where 60,000 people work. There are 60 accelerators as well. There are 1,200 R&D centers. Again, 60,000 people work in these locations. So coming back to your question, for both ecosystems here in Dubai and Turkey, and to follow up on the point I was making, the government also has a setup here in Dubai that helps Turkish startups. I mean, it's called the Turkish Trade Center. And it surprises me sometimes that not many people know about it. I try to promote it as much as possible because it's an excellent incentive where the government pays for 75% of your rent and marketing costs. And you just set up here. Currently, there are 12 companies here. Overall, I mean, we see that, for example, 2020, the expectation is that their exports will reach about 50 million US dollars, and that's considerable. So that Turkish Trade Center is an accelerator. I mean, you just sign up to it through TIM, Turkish Exporters Assembly. And what it does is they give you a desk here in a center with the other ones. So it helps you benefit also from the experience and the knowledge of the other startups that are here, the other technology firms that are here, as well as the experience and guidance of the staff of the Turkish Trade Center. So I think it's an excellent incentive that more and more should be using to open up here in Dubai.
Awesome. And then Enis, I guess I come to you. We talk about your portfolio company. I mean, Given 500 is one of the most active investors. Can you explain the mindset of a founder? I mean, here you have Mr. Ilker saying, cool, come set up here. We'll subsidize you 75%. And yet we were trying to come up with how many startups we know that have considered the MENA region as an opportunity for them. Can you speak a little bit to the mindset of a founder and what you think needs to happen to potentially see more companies scale to MENA, given that ultimately in venture, scale is the name of the game, and being able to capture new markets is an opportunity for them?
Sure. Let's look at the evolution again of the startup landscape here in Turkey. I'd say the initial success stories were these local powerhouses, right? So these are verticals that are deep enough. So even if you become big in Turkey, you're a couple $100 million business. And we've had a bunch of those over the past 10 years. A lot of these companies tried a market in MENA of some sort, either UAE, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, doesn't matter, but they did try a MENA market and they failed. Maybe because of the cultural barriers, maybe because these are very operational businesses, so it's tough to scale anywhere in the world because the nature of the business is operational. So but I mean, most of them unfortunately failed. So that's like the one pillar of Turkish success story. That's where you can see a clear path to success, and the recent example being MAGNiTT, for example. The second clear way, I think, is to become a global company, go for early adapters, be on the front line of technology. You need early adapters, high enterprise budgets. So these companies initially want to scale to Western Europe or the US because the purchasing power is higher, the technology adoption is higher, much many early adapters. So these are companies like Citus Data acquired by Microsoft or Opsgenie acquired by Atlassian. So that's like a second breed of companies where we see often happening. And if you look at the reports for the past 2 years, you would see a lot of these two companies. I would say the third bracket, which we also have a number of companies in our portfolio, are companies like Insider. So these companies, they are in very mature markets. They cannot try and go to the US. That would be suicidal. They would die because US is much more mature. So they grow their product in Turkey. They get some financial resources. They understand their value proposition, how they differentiate. Once they're successful in Turkey, they have to expand to countries like Turkey. And US is not a place like Turkey on any level. So what they try is to be able to pinpoint which countries those can be. That can be Eastern Europe, Romania, Poland. That can be Middle East, Saudi Arabia, UAE, or they can try Southeast Asian markets. And Insider is a really good example of that. So for those companies, I think launching an office in the UAE and then targeting the MENA region, it's amazing. It's a billion people, same language, culturally much more easier to adapt compared to say Romania or Poland because Europe is much more fragmented. It's tougher culturally and also from a language perspective, it's tougher. But I don't think on this third pillar, we have a bunch of portfolio companies. I'd say out of 40 companies in our portfolio, 10 to 12 of them do target MENA on some way or another, but we don't have a generation of success stories there. So there are not that many precedents that we can show for like Insider. I mean, I can tell that Insider is one, but I cannot just tell you the second, third, and the fourth off the top of my head, which is the main problem. But I think that's happening slowly. So if we speak a couple of years from now, I feel like we're going to be a bunch of companies like Insider, and expanding to Middle East from Turkey is also going to be a proven method to go for.
And I guess also for any of the founders that are from MENA that are potentially interested in going to Turkey, I mean, what do you think is the opportunities for us as local founders to explore a new market? What makes the Turkish ecosystem attractive? Mr. Ilke already referred to talent, but what are the other areas that could be, and how should they go about potentially setting up there?
Well, first of all, there are a couple of examples. You know, Vamda, Beko, Middle East Venture Partners, Hub 71, they already invested in Turkey. I can name some of the companies like Moda Nisa, Moda Cruise, Volt Lines, Tarfin. These are a couple of names. There are some examples, but it's not, as you said, it should be more. When you ask someone Turkey, they will start first of all the big market, because I mean, UAE, 10 million, 9 million people. Turkey is 85 million, big population, big consumer market, talented people, well-educated, dynamic market, especially social media penetration, credit card penetration, mobile penetration is so high. They are open to technology, not only using, but also production of technology is very important. Geographically, we are close to Europe, and it's one of the top things that we can use. We talk about government supports and grants. So there's a lot of reasons to come to reason, but also there are some things that people are afraid to come. First of all, currency volatility. So if your costs are in UAE and if you come to Turkey, it can be difficult to manage. But if you do vice versa, like you can put your cost center to Turkey, like hire the talents in Turkey, but do the export to UAE or do the production, export to the MENA region, I think it's the best option. And sometimes, like, because I'm from media, I like using headlines. So in Turkey, there's talent, funding is missing, but in UAE, there is funding, but talent is missing. So don't get offended. There's good talent, but I want to make it more attractive.
I can understand that. I think what was fascinating when I went last year was exactly what Mr. Ilker mentioned, all the techno parks. I mean, you're talking about a huge amount of grant money investment in university education at a very early age, which can then really help develop the technology in the space with a population and investment in education that helps support that. Very similar to a certain extent to what you see in Egypt, for instance, and when we were speaking to the people on the panelists from Pakistan, and even in Saudi Arabia, for instance, you're seeing a lot of investment in the educational space as the route to driving the development of the ecosystem. I do agree with you on the arbitrage of the currency. That's something that many people, which can be a massive benefit for Turkish startups looking to scale out, but also an opportunity for companies. I mean, again, I would like to remind anybody on the call, if you have any questions, please share them in the Q&A. I'm actually going to ask Mr. Ilker the question that Abed has just asked us, because it's the second part of what I was asking you earlier, which is we're a startup based in Jordan that started to pave a way to expand to Turkey. What do you recommend as a second step in that journey to being able to do that? I mean, effectively, it's slightly technical. I'm sure you know the answer, but if you're not comfortable, then fine. But if you want to set up in Turkey, here we know that you need to have a free zone, a license offshore, onshore. You need to have a license registration. You need to hire with visas. Is that similar in Turkey? What's the situation if you want to set up a company to be able to operate within Turkey as a Middle Eastern startup?
Well, it's not as complicated and it's not as expensive to set up in Turkey in that sense. I mean, you can set up a company in Turkey with 100% ownership. There are no restrictions on local ownership. I mean, I don't know, of course, what Jordanian friend, the exact industry he operates in, what exactly he does. However, I mean, as I mentioned, there the techno parks that he can think about setting up his early stage, especially. I mean, he can go through the investment agency of the president. That's I mean, that's one institution that you're familiar with as well, and that we as a consulate work very closely with, organizing events back and forth. Where they send us startups and we introduce them here. But whatever they do, my recommendation is the same recommendation I give to business people coming here to Dubai as well. It's that to take your steps carefully. I mean, do not be overwhelmed by some people you meet and follow their path. Make sure to do your research. Make sure to get a proper advice, professional advice. Get a lawyer, you know, do the steps that you have to do, the things that you would do back at home. This is, I mean, one big issue that we see with Turkish business people coming here to Dubai as well. The steps that they take at home, they do not take here, and vice versa. I mean, the business people here, when they go to Turkey, they meet somebody and they're infatuated with that person, and they just jump in, and then next thing you know, they're knocking on our door to help them salvage their investment. So my advice is always to do things. I mean, take your time. I mean, do not be too quick to jump, and play it safe. That's always advice I give to any business person.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Very useful advice. Enis, investment landscape in Turkey. So we've seen here, we're going to be bringing out our Q3 report next Monday. Beginning of the year, and I think it was very similar in Turkey. We know that deals take about 6 to 9 months to come to fruition and getting signed. So whatever was being reported for H1 or specifically Q1 has been already factored in. So it's not really a true impact effect of COVID. Yet what we've seen now in Q3 is the lowest number of transactions of investments that has taken place in the last 14 quarters in the MENA region by number of transactions. What's the landscape and the impact of COVID been on the startup ecosystem in Turkey?
I feel like if there was no COVID, I feel like the Turkish startup ecosystem in general, we're probably gonna have more than $200 million invested this year. That was my expectation, because there's a lot of new local funds that are set up. Oops, you see my cat? He's gone. So I was expecting more than $200 million invested to startups this year. But then, of course, COVID came in. I think now we're going to probably land somewhere around 100, which is similar to last year and the year before and the year before and the year before. I feel like a lot of local funds have been set up and they're mandated to invest, so they're going to continue to invest. But I was really bullish on the fact that a lot of the Western European VCs were looking into Turkey, talking to our founders, talking to a bit larger companies for larger Series B or Series C rounds. I see that that's not happening because of COVID. I mean, eventually you can always invest through Zoom. If you're a small fund, a seed fund, writing 100K or a couple 100K ticket over a couple Zoom calls, that's doable. But if you're trying to lead around that's $5 to $10 million, you always want to meet the team, get your foot on the ground, spend a couple of weeks, do your due diligence, do your customer reference meetings, etc. And if you cannot do all that, then of course there's too much friction to make the deal happen. So I think it's impacted a lot. Yet because of the local funds that have been set up over the past 2 years and this year including, we're probably gonna be on the same level as the past years.
Okay, and just in terms of industries, are you seeing a similar thing that where there are investments that are happening, it's in the COVID impacted industries where you're seeing acceleration in demand, acceleration? I mean, that's been the typical thing that we've seen here. And the second one, before I go to Mr. Ersoy, a big reason for the drop in number of transactions has been, let's put it, a pause or a halt in accelerator programs. That's a big concern because if accelerator programs dry up because they're usually physical, many are now going virtual, you're beginning to see a reduction in potential pipeline for the future. Is that similarly taking place in Turkey, or are there accelerator programs continuing through this current environment?
Is that for me or for Mr. Ersoy?
Well, for me, for you, Enis, now, and then I'll ask.
For me?
Yeah.
Perfect. So I feel like, yes, that definitely has an impact. A lot of these accelerators create the top of the funnel, both for us, but also for angels and other micro funds. And once that dries out, that takes the number of transactions down. I mean, I think the volume is not that much affected because these rounds are like only a couple 100K rounds, but the volume goes down. The number of transactions goes down. I was going to elaborate on what you said about industries. Because of the recent exits that Turkey had with Grum Games, Peak Games, Masomo, etc., there are a lot of, on the gaming industry, there are a lot of rounds that are not captured in your report or in other reports, but even I personally know at least probably $30 million invested into Turkish gaming companies through international investors actually, but these are not captured in the report. So because of the boom in the gaming industry, thanks to these amazing exits, we see that capital is more lenient to come only to this industry. But I think all the other industries, I mean, B2B SaaS has been hot in Turkey for the past couple of years, especially B2B SaaS companies that export technology, that's still going on. Local fintech, still going on. Local e-commerce, I feel like these grocery companies, generalist e-commerce platforms, and the legacy large retails are kind of combining into becoming a one industry. They're all coming closer to each other, and there's a lot of funding either on the PE level or on the VC level there as well. But one outlier is gaming.
Yeah, for sure. And on the accelerators?
The accelerators, I mean, they were creating the top of the funnel for all of us. Now, because they're doing all this virtually, the top of the funnel kind of dried out. I mean, we meet with less entrepreneurs, and maybe that doesn't affect us as much because we're a VC fund, we're mandated to invest, we have to invest, but an angel investor isn't mandated to invest. So that affects the angel investment volume more than it does the VC volume.
Yeah. So again, if anybody has any questions, please shoot them through in the Q&A section. I'll be happy to ask. On that point, which is something I wanted to ask, Ersoy, one thing that was fascinating for us in the report is that the angel community seems to be a lot more developed in Turkey than it is potentially in MENA. When we track back historically, a lot of deals have been by individuals as opposed to institutions or private investors. And of course, that's challenging for us to capture, and we have our mechanism of being able to do that. Is there a mindset of an investor community in Turkey for angel investing? I mean, how does that psychology kind of come to play?
Well, it's interesting to see that before my TV presenting, I was 17 years in banking and in asset management and sell side and buy side. So I know the psychology of Turkish investors. Because of high interest rates and high inflation, Turkish investors are generally risk averse. And the traditional investment is generally to gold or real estate or time deposit in the bank or because of devaluation, FX deposits. So risky assets has not developed institutionally for long years. Recently, it started increasing, and before moving to Dubai, even in my company, in an asset management company, we didn't have a venture capital fund. There was venture capital fund, but I'm talking about bank-owned asset management companies. So why did the angel investment started to increase? According to my view, one of them is people who are getting to their retirement age. They are already have like enough money, but they don't want to get retired and just sit idle. And in their retirement, they want to do something. These are the what we can call is smart money. Among my friends, I see lots of people even asking me, do you know a nice startup I want to invest? I think this is one style. The other one is there are people in Turkey who are like bored of traditional investments, who has money. Previously, they made it from, I don't know, real estate or textile. These are like, I would not say they don't want to be involved in the management of the companies, but they want to invest in many companies. This is the second style. And also there are some people who already exited from like startup business. They got money and they want to invest more. And the last one, of course, there is tax incentive. You can deduct your the income you get from angel investment from your income tax. So I think these are the main reasons angel investing is more than institutional investors in Turkey.
I think that's fascinating because there's a lot to learn in the MENA region from kind of some of those mechanisms. And that's where we keep saying there's a lot of cross-pollination and intellectual capital transfer. That tax incentive mechanism in the UK, for instance, is really planting seeds for many of these startups. It makes it a huge incentive for angel investors. And while the angel community in MENA is growing, there aren't that many angels, should we say. You're either a family office and you're doing it as family wealth, or there are angel groups who pull together, but the angel community at large isn't incentivized to invest in startups. And that's a challenge. Just before I go to Mr. Ilker Ersoy, one of the things that we've seen in the region, Kareem's exit, Amazon's acquisition of Souk, etc., those get on Bloomberg. That creates international buzz and awareness. Is that similar with Turkish startups? Do they make it to the international media? And does it excite investors from the international community on the activity that's happening in Turkey? Or is the Middle East just in a different way promoting it to US outlets for the success stories that are happening here?
Well, in terms of like Kareem's, like Kareem, Uber or Souk, Amazon, to be honest, I don't know how it was captured in Turkish market, but a similar thing happened in Turkey this year. As you said, Peak came to Zynga, and it was a big event. It put all the spotlights in Turkey, and especially Enes mentioned it to gaming and the startup economy. I think it's like just a start. I think Turkey has a very big potential, but it just the media just started to get involved in this recently. This what I think, because before there was Yemek Sepeti, Gitti Gidiyor, Trendyol. There was really big exits, but I think media's interest is not still enough, and I think Turkey has a more potential exits.
And so, I mean, to jump on that, Mr. Ilker, what more can be done to kind of shine a spotlight on the tech industry in Turkey and the opportunities that exist there? How do we get more of these success stories to get out to people because it works both ways. The survey was, why do Turkish startups not come to MENA? How do you make it more attractive to do it the other way around? And again, it's getting those success stories out. What more can be done to kind of, I mean, the question, I'm going to rephrase it, but to a certain extent, demystify the conceptual barrier that US or European tech companies are better than the local equivalents of them. But almost you need to be aware of what's happening in this space.
Well, I'll get to your question in 1 second. Also, just following up on the previous question about angels, I think also the large exit of Peak Games piqued interest in the Turkish society towards investing in startups. I think that's one of the reasons. And as Ersoy mentioned, the government incentives. Whereby angel investors, they register to the treasury, has been working quite well on our end. About 600 angels registered to the treasury right now.
Wow.
11
what do they get
angel
as advantage? What's the benefit that they get by registering with the treasury?
You get a tax break on the investment you make on the angel. So I think that's one factor that should be kept in mind, especially with COVID, where there was some interest in looking into alternative investment methods. You see perhaps more angels appearing as well. But the landscape is changing also in Turkey. I mean, you see a lot of corporate investors coming into the game, banks especially, that are also leveling the playing field. Plus, Turkish VCs are maturing. More VCs are being created, and the old ones are creating their new funds. So there are many VCs in Turkey that created their second fund, or are going to create their second fund in the coming days. So that ecosystem is maturing. Turkish ecosystem is, I think that's the best way to put it, is maturing. However, like as you asked, the perception doesn't live to the hype or to the reality of Turkey, unfortunately. But that's a mindset. That's a mindset that's very difficult to change. There's no less there's no less talent in Turkey than there's anywhere in Europe. We have as many engineers, we have as many software developers in Turkey as any large country in Europe or countries around the world. But that's a barrier that I think we will break over time as the ecosystem matures and we have more success stories like Peak Games as well. I think that will change the mindset in the international arena about Turkish startups. Perhaps also another issue is that many exits in Turkey are done early stage. I mean, a lot of the ecosystem is early stage. The later stage, I mean, that's one. If we're going to make any criticism on how the Turkish ecosystem should evolve, and it's going there. It's the lack of larger funds, private equities. I mean, the lack of private equities pushes Turkish startups to like Insider to open up abroad to channel some larger funding, and then when they have a success, you see them as a Singapore company, not a Turkish company, unfortunately. So as the ecosystem matures and we have more and more success stories, and I think that's coming. I think Peak Games was just a preview of what is to come. As we have more success stories coming, I think the perception will change as well.
I mean, I'm going to leverage both of what you said, Ersoy and Mr. Ilker, with regards to one, the increase in the exits that are happening. Two, you were saying, Ersoy, about the psychological mindset historically being in more traditional assets. Enis, you made the point very eloquently that the arbitrage opportunity is there. Ultimately, for the amount that you're investing and the potential of the exits, that should be a dream for LPs. You speak to LPs, I'm sure, through your fund. Are you seeing this new interest in the asset class, or what needs to change to see more institutional investors double down on the asset class of venture capital? And putting that into the context of COVID, one of the things that I've been a big advocate for being worried about in MENA is huge energy and investment has been put into growing this ecosystem. But when a crisis like COVID comes along, naturally investors are more reserved in deploying capital into things that they find risky. So pre-COVID, was there interest? Post-COVID, is it going to be a bigger challenge to encourage people to invest in venture in Turkey?
I think with all these success stories that happen, including Peak Games, obviously, there's a lot of interest here locally in Turkey. A lot of the large family offices want to put money into VC funds, and we've seen a rise in demand. We're now doing the first close of our second fund. It's a 30 million euro vehicle. The Turkish Treasury is anchoring it along with the different corporates and high net worth individuals. And we've actually closed 4 LPs within COVID timeframe without having meet them face to face, just through a couple Zoom calls, which is amazing. The problem is there is no institutional money here. I mean, there's no fund of funds that can put in 10 to 20 million into our fund. It doesn't exist. There is no single family office. Even if you go to the richest in Turkey, they're never going to give 10 to 20 million to a venture fund. And that's normal. I understand that. So when you compare the Turkish fundraising in Turkey versus fundraising in UAE, it's incomparable. You cannot compare the two. Whereas in UAE, you have these large family offices. They can easily chip in 20 million, 30 million, 50 million, whatever, which is actually what happened with our 500 MENA fund like 3-4 years ago. So when you compare Turkey, I think better analogy is to compare it with Hungary or Poland, where there are some local success stories. There are local angels and investors who can put in 250K to $1 million into different funds, sure. But to get to a larger fund size, to be able to raise 50 to 100 million funds, you need institutional capital. And internationally, there is that institutional capital like EBRD, EIF, IFC, they all invest into Turkish funds. But apart from that, we have to create our local fund of fund mechanisms, and the government has been doing that for a while now. So 1% of the pension fund should be invested into alternative assets, including VC. That's now a law that they have to abide by. There's a Turkish Development Bank that was formed over the past 4 or 5 years. Now they have their own Turkish Development Fund to invest as a fund of fund mechanism. The Turkish Treasury is stepping up to investing into our fund and also 4 other funds. So they're investing into 5 funds in total. They're trying to create a mechanism where these funds can actually IPO into the local market to create early liquidity to their investors. And actually, this week, the first VC funds run by Al Baraka, a Turkish bank, IPO'd into the stock market. I think more and more is going to happen. So when you look into Poland, all these laws passed probably 5-7 years ago. And today in Poland, there are 80 VC funds, 80. 13 VC funds have actually IPO'd to the Warsaw Stock Exchange. So you can actually just buy there or sell their stock. Brings early liquidity to investors and becomes a great incentive for other investors to invest into VC funds. So I think all these things are coming into place, but it's unrealistic to expect the public to put in, or family offices in Turkey to put in 5 or 10 million into a VC fund. It's never going to happen. That's why the government is giving these incentives and subsidies here.
I just want to clear one thing up. I think there is a big misconception, that the Middle East has all this money. It does have.
It does. Obviously, it does
have money. But when you talk about family offices, their general reaction is to put that money into a VC fund in the US. It's not necessarily to invest locally. I think there is a misconception. There are funds of funds that are now becoming sovereign and pumping money into the venture capital. And yes, there is more investment, but it's nowhere near the disconnect in the demand and supply of capital here. Again,
let me argue otherwise and tell you, if you look into investors of different VC funds in UAE, and I don't want to give names, and look into how much capital they've raised, you would see large companies or family offices putting 20 to 30 million into VC funds. Yeah. But if you look into the Turkish VC funds, then there's only like probably 10 of us. Like we have 30 investors. All of them put in 500K to $1 million each. And then we have the Turkish Treasury who's putting a good portion, but I mean, not comparable to what the family funds the family offices putting in the UAE. I mean, so that's the case of the Turkish landscape, where you have to fundraise from 30 or 40 investors to get to a certain level, because none of them are going to put in 30 to 50% of the fund by themselves, and rightly so.
Yeah. I mean, look, again, I don't disagree. Sorry.
If I may jump in, I mean, just with one sentence, is that the government is really also working to to bridge that gap at the top. And right now there's the fund of funds being created, as you mentioned in the development bank is working on that, and other institutions as well. So I think that will come, and that will really aid the ecosystem.
That's a big catalyst here in the region. Sorry, Erso, you were putting your hand up.
Sorry, I want to jump into also, I want to add one more point to Enis. I mean, also I hear a lot of CVCs, corporate venture capitals are improving in Turkey. I hear more companies started setting up their own venture capitals. I want to add this one. And also about, I don't want to make a misconception about funding in the region, because I think there is a perception also maybe with my friends also, when you see a tourist in Turkey and spending too much, doesn't mean that they have lots of money and they want to put it into your startup. Yeah. So there's a misconception, perception also in our minds that there is smart money also here. There is money, but smart money.
Yeah, I mean, that was the point that I was trying to say. I think that there genuinely is a perception that there is a lot more capital, capital deployed in the whole of the MENA region is still 800 million, right? And that's across 17 countries. That isn't quite, yes, there's money, but what my point is, and there will always be family offices investing, but the perception that it's flooded with oil money and it's being in venture, if it is, it's likely to be in funds in the US or Europe, less likely to be in the local funds, although that mindset's changing, exactly the same as Turkey. The peak games, the souks, the exits has changed the rhetoric here in the region. Mr. Ilker, there's a question. How do you see the chances of venture studios being subsidized by the state so they can launch and grow startups? So specifically,
yeah, go ahead. I mean, I'm not familiar with the subject. I think this is a more question addressed to our authorities in Turkey about venture studios. I will not be able to answer that properly.
Sure. Look, gentlemen, I mean, before I close this out, I mean, do you have any other final views on the opportunities and the cross challenges and opportunities on both sides, where you can see that we can support and the data can help kind of bridge this gap?
May I jump in?
Please.
Yeah, I mean, before you close, there's one issue that I want to raise that I should have raised perhaps at the beginning. Is a concern that many have, and that they raise it with me at every opportunity. It's the political risks that there are in investing back and forth in Turkey or here. I mean, that scares people off, especially lately. I see we have quite a few Turkish listeners on the call. There's also a big hype in the media about what is going on here and how they're restricting Turkish business and all that. I can assure you that in UAE, I will not talk about the other countries in the region. However, in UAE and specifically in Dubai, we do not have such a trend. I mean, yes, I will not deny that there are political difficulties. There are some challenges that we have to overcome. However, we see that the trade volume has increased over the years. I do not see, for example, the other day in the press, they were saying that they are firing Turks in Dubai from companies. It's nonsense. It never happens. And I can assure everyone that there are more and more people coming here. Also, I know people who took up top-level positions, even in government incorporated companies. So there's no such thing. So what I tell everyone is that do not mind the politics. Let the politicians worry about the politics, and do your business. I mean, money flows. We say in Turkish, water flows and finds its path, and that's when it comes to business, that's the way. You cannot block demand and supply from meeting each other.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Ersoy, any final thoughts?
Well, when you were introducing, you say bridging UAE and Turkey. That's what my dream, to be honest. When I first moved here, I said, why don't Turkey and UAE don't do too much business? So, as most of the people know, on Bosphorus there are now Turkish 3 bridges, which puts Europe and Asia together. So we can bridge with by your help, with your report, and with ourselves, with our general counsel, and with people in Turkey. There can be more business done with those two regions. I know Nusret is not a startup, but he became famous here, and he went to world. He scaled up from here. MLS, MBD, both Denizbank. So business is still going. I wish I can say more successful startup stories, but here in this region, market size is missing, and agriculture, for example, another topic with Turkey can tap here, agri-tech can be here. So there is win-win situation if both regions, both Turkey and this region, focus on doing more business. That's what.
And look, there's a question that came in just before I jump to Enis, because I want to ask him the flip side of that. But my view is that VCs and corporates, and I'm generalizing because each one will have their own mandate, are interested in investing in startups that could come from Turkey. But let's be clear, their mandate is potentially to invest in the region. So you would need to look to scale into the region, set up operations and service the region. And that's the arbitrage opportunity from a geographical perspective. There are people looking to invest, but you need to have to be ready to come and service the market. It's very unlikely that they'll invest for you to operate only in your market. And I wonder, Enis, if the same applies. I mean, of course, if you have any final thoughts, but if the same applies for any startups in MENA looking to raise funds from Turkish startups, is it a given that they should look to operate there as well?
Yes, it is. I mean, I would love to tell you, no, this is a financial asset class. If something makes sense, investors will invest. It doesn't work that way because of how the money is tied to. It comes with a mandate. And because of that mandate, the companies that you invest into should fit into that mandate. And that mandate, in most of the cases, is bounded by geography or by country. So if a MENA company is looking to operate in Turkey, then the number of VC funds that might be interested in that company can be 10, 12. But if the same MENA company doesn't do any operations in Turkey and want to fundraise from Turkey, then the number of VC funds that can theoretically invest into that company would be 1 or 2. So yes, I think it's a must. And same goes for, I believe, Turkish companies who are looking to operate in the Middle East. There's huge sums of pools of money that they can tap into. But if they don't want to operate in the Middle East, then they can only go to Middle Eastern funds who constantly look into Turkey, like Beko or Vamda or MEDP, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like what İlker Bey told me really resonated with me. I mean, he said that the trade volume has been going up and up and up, regardless of the politics. And it's, I think, important to be factful. And when you look into the facts, Turkey has 55,000 engineers that graduate on a yearly basis. That's number 2 in Europe. Number of developers, growth in number of developers in Turkey is more than 16%. That's number 1 in Europe. So from a technology and tech savviness perspective and number of developers perspective, there's amazing talent here. So to be able to build a technology team in Turkey, scale that technology team in Turkey, to be able to retain the talent is very easy compared to other parts of the world. That's why we believe in this arbitrage opportunity of backing, having your kitchen in Turkey and then exporting technology. And when you look into our first fund, we have 40 companies. They in total generate about $127 million in revenue. Only 6% of that is denominated in Turkish lira. So only 6% is
revenue that comes from Turkey.
Okay.
The other 94% is coming from outside of Turkey. So that I'm assuming that there's the arbitrage in the revenue versus costs. I don't know if it's going to reconnect. Look, gentlemen, many thanks for your time today. It was great to get your insights. We're looking forward to continuing to work. This is an open call and invitation to any of the VCs, startups, investors. If there is information that you would like us to update, make sure that it's included in our year-end report. We look to continue to do this on a quarterly, if not monthly basis, to make sure that we have the most up-to-date information. And I think that there's a lot of learning lessons and cross-pollination across these venture markets. And we'll do our bit where we can to see how we can support. But thank you very much, gentlemen. And we look forward to sending you the end-of-year report later this year.
Thank you. Best of luck.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.